Hello everyone. Today's video is about a little bit of a different topic, talking about the link between mitochondrial dysfunction and cancer development. Just before jumping into the video, if you don't mind taking a quick moment to please like, share, subscribe, and or post a quick comment on the video, I'd really appreciate it. So thanks in advance for taking a second to do that. And as per usual, nothing that I'm saying should be construed as medical advice. This is for informational purposes only. And if you need medical advice, please talk to your healthcare provider to get that advice. So somebody posted a question on one of my other videos. The original one was called "Why is creatine important for the mitochondria?" Riveting topic. I posted that about 10 months ago, and someone 12 days ago was watching that video and said, so can you assume that reducing mitochondrial dysfunction would reduce the chance of cancer? And then I think there's maybe an autocorrect typo there. If reducing mitochondrial dysfunction would reduce the chance of cancer and exercising, let's see here, if consumed and exercising on a regular basis in older individuals. Read it the first time and it made sense. I think that basically the gist of the question is, would reducing mitochondrial dysfunction reduce cancer risk, and maybe tying exercise on a regular basis into that, and would that also reduce cancer risk? So these are good questions. So maybe just kind of starting at the end of the question, around exercise and cancer development. I mean, at the end of the day, we know that there are better prognostic outcomes when folks have a cancer diagnosis, they're undergoing cancer treatment, and if they are physically active within their abilities to be physically active, that does lead to better outcomes, usually fewer side effects associated with cancer treatments, whether it's chemotherapy, radiation, or what have you, and also so better tolerance of those treatments, and then also just better outcomes overall. So some studies show that there is some improved chance of survival, prolongation of life in folks dealing with the cancer diagnosis. So exercise, definitely something to consider if it's feasible and appropriate and all of that, depending on the individual case when there's a cancer diagnosis afoot. In terms of actually reducing the risk of cancer development, I'm not 100% sure what the research literature says around that. What I do know, though, because I've given presentations on this and looked into the research literature on it, is that folks who have more muscle mass, on average, tend to have longer lifespans and health spans. So meaning lifespans, obvious, more time being alive, and then health span, meaning more time being alive before being unwell, unhealthy, dealing with kind of a more serious health condition. So from that perspective, there is certainly a correlation between exercise and cancer reduction risk. In terms of mitochondrial dysfunction, it's a really fascinating topic. I've gone down this rabbit hole several years ago. There's this fantastic book. It's very long, arduous read, but it's a very, very good book, and it's written by this PhD, I believe. I don't think he's a medical doctor. I can't remember now. Anyways, his name is Dr. Thomas Seyfried. He wrote this wonderful book called Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, and he basically puts together a very, very strong position, predicated on decades of research literature, strongly suggesting that cancer is something that develops in cells that are dealing with or suffering from unhealthy physiology, but largely centered around unhealthy mitochondrial function, aka mitochondrial dysfunction. And that's really fascinating, because any insight that we can get into why a very challenging, awful disease diagnosis like cancer is happening, I think is very valuable. And then, of course, for folks like myself who are self-proclaimed mitochondriacs, who are quite obsessed with how wonderful those little organelles are, how incredibly important they are for cellular health and function and whatnot, it's very interesting to kind of see that tying in. It's like, those mitochondria, is there anything that they can't do? Those mitochondria, is there any aspect of health that they don't, very, very heavily impact? And the answer is no. They're amazing, and they're involved in everything, it seems. I think that supporting mitochondrial health, reducing mitochondrial dysfunction is crucially important, and I think that there is a very strong connection between obtaining and maintaining good mitochondrial health, and it very likely would translate into a lower risk of cancer development. Now, with that being said, to my understanding, outside of some of the Petri dish studies that have looked into this, I'm not sure that there have been large, sort of irrefutable human studies that are linking, addressing certain types of mitochondrial dysfunction treatment to reduce risk of cancer. So for example, folks who have chronic fatigue syndrome, also known as myalgic encephalomyelitis, those folks, irrefutably have lower than optimal mitochondrial function. And yet, have there been any studies looking at a person with unaddressed CFS rather, being at a higher risk of cancer development, or that folks who are treated for their mitochondrial dysfunction wind up enjoying over and above, regaining their health, having a lower risk of cancer development? I don't think any of those studies have been done. I've looked into it previously, haven't spent weeks and weeks of my life doing an exhaustive search, but I've looked into whether there's any correlation between chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, certain autoimmune conditions, and basically conditions that a lot of folks who are suffering from complex chronic illness get labeled with. And I have not been able to find any research literature, looking at cancer risk associated with those conditions. If anybody listening to the video has found those research studies, I'd love to hear about them. So on paper, it makes sense that there would be this, fairly strong connection between keeping healthy mitochondria and having a reduced risk of cancer development, but I'm just not sure that that's been explored in any super tangible way. In roundabout ways, absolutely. We know that if we keep our level of toxin exposure lower, that's really good for the mitochondria. And so many toxins that we're exposed to, whether it's synthetic chemicals, heavy metals, etc., those are carcinogenic. So we know that there's a correlation there. Certain types of mold toxins are carcinogenic. These mold toxins are really bad for the mitochondria. So keeping those at bay, that's going to have an anti-cancer cell effect. We know that keeping blood sugar regulation in a healthier state is something that has positive impacts on our physiology that should confer reduced pathophysiology of cancer cells, like by keeping insulin levels lower, keeping estrogen levels lower, and different things like that. But these are things that again, I don't think they've been definitively correlated or shown, I should say, to confer a reduced risk of cancer development. So anyways, I wanted to post this video because somebody asked the question. I wanted to chime in. I think it's a really fascinating topic. I would love it if there was more research, if there was research that was done that was definitively asking these questions around mitochondrial dysfunction. But unfortunately, it's kind of a challenging area to study. It's a challenging area to measure in terms of measuring, mitochondrial dysfunction. You can measure mitochondrial diseases like genetic disorders fairly easily, but actually mitochondrial dysfunction, there are some labs that have some metrics looking at this, but I don't think there's anything that has been sort of widely accepted as a gold standard marker or blood test or whatnot for mitochondrial function overall. So tricky thing to test, but theoretically, I think that it makes all the sense in the world that if we keep our mitochondria humming along, then not only should we enjoy a reduced risk of various other illness types, but I would assume cancer as well. So I think that's all that I'll say about this topic. Thank you for the question. If anybody has any comments or questions on this topic or anything else, just post it in the comment section below, and I will do my best to answer as soon as I can.